to make it possible that tomatoes are accessible for the global northern consumer all year round. So how is this possible? So I started looking at how PETA advocates, eat your tomatoes, eat produce. It's a great way to be healthy and no animals are harmed, right? And there's this overall context that PETA is not racist and they don't advocate racism, they don't benefit from racism. But if you really look at the products that they're advocating and you look at tomatoes, for example, Amy's Pizza that has tomatoes in it, Tofutti Pizza Pizzazz that has tomatoes in it, PETA never actually talks more deeply about the fact that tomatoes, NAFTA makes it possible for people in the global north to have cheap tomatoes. Why is that? Because there's this underlying theme. The national narrative of Mexico is that your industry and the state can treat indigenous Mexican laborers horribly because of the narrative that they are not seen as quote unquote as equals or as equals to more white people. So they can be exploited because of the fact that they are not white, and they can be paid poverty level wages to pick these tomatoes. So there's just this assumption, there's this understanding that it's completely okay to exploit particular racialized minorities so the global north can have their tomatoes. And then if you look at this woman, her name is Deborah Barnes' work, she looks more at the tomato trail, and she kind of does this deep research where it shows that those who are out harvesting these tomatoes, being blasted with pesticides, they live in the most horrible, horrendous conditions, and it's just accepted because it's of racism and sexism. And there's this belief that women, indigenous women, are actually more naturally suited to take on the harsh environment of environmental toxins and pesticides put on these tomatoes. And then if you go and look at the packing plans where the tomatoes are packed, mestizas, lighter-skinned Mexican women, are mostly hired for that work, and they're paid like 10 times more than the indigenous people who pick it. And this happens because of racism and sexism and these racist and sexist narratives around who should harvest what ingredients and who has the right to consume them. So this is really important to know because I'm just focusing on tomatoes, but you can focus on all of these different products that PETA advocates. And if you look at it and if you do a genealogy of where these commodities come from, you'll see how they're made possible and they're accessible to us as global northern consumers because of things like NAFTA, where it's actually expected that certain people in the world are just going to have to be, quote unquote, our servants and our slaves to create these products for us, even if they are, quote unquote, vegan, cruelty free. So I did a genealogy of Hershey's, and I did a genealogy of also Soy Delicious to really look at cocoa. So PETA really advocates Soy Delicious products. And most people don't realize that, yes, if you eat Soy Delicious and it's conventional cocoa, most likely, 75% of the world's chocolate is harvested by enslaved children in the Ivory Coast, right? So my dissertation chapter looks at these particular products that PETA is advocating as a way, to practice your animal rights activism. But nowhere on this site does PETA ever talk about these particular structural injustices, the food commodity chain, what it even means to consume as a way to show your animal rights activism. So I became concerned about this because of the way they're strategically using Trayvon Martin as the poster child case of what real racism looks like. So when that is the poster child case of what real racism looks like, and then they're advocating, not only this is what real racism looks like, but we feel that if we don't tackle this particular type of individual violent racism, then society is going to accept that this is okay, and we don't stand up for this. And at the same time, these particular types of individual acts are connected to the exploitation that we see that animals go through, that abuse. So I became concerned that their particular usage of racism really does obscure the more structural and more insidious forms of racism that are contingent, the more insidious forms of racism that one doesn't really see because of their location. So I'm a geographer. I'm all about looking at how your place, your space, where you are situated physically, geographically, psychically, and how that is connected to your role as knower in the commodity chain. And then, how you enact your activism, if you are an activist, through buying or or consuming in a way where you think is going to alleviate suffering. So my concern with PETA and overall, I guess Ingrid Newkirk's work, if you read all of her books, she doesn't talk about the structural racism. She doesn't talk about NAFTA. She doesn't talk about what it means that if she advocates a particular way of saving animals, that it actually means exploitation of like millions of human beings, largely non-white human beings, that make vegan commodities possible. So this is still, my work is still a work in progress. So a lot of this is kind of, I'm still searching where and how to organize where it goes. But what I wanted to talk more about with the audience in terms of animal rights activism is, okay, so I have this information. I want to make sure if I want to support the liberation of animals, how can I do that in a way that does not subjugate and suppress other sentient beings, especially human beings? How do I do that? So my concern is that a lot of us don't have a critical literacy around what it means to consume. And a lot of my work looks at even fair trade products, what we call equal exchange products. So if I were to look at vegan cocoa and I try to find vegan cocoa that is fair trade, what does that mean for me as a consumer? What does that mean for me as an activist if I want to support the anti-specious work of PETA, but also I want to make sure that other human beings are not neglected and not exploited so I can get my chocolate. So I've been looking at the Food Empowerment Project, and they're out in Santa Clara, California, and I've been investigating the ways in which FEP, Food Empowerment Project, they're a vegan organization, they take they want to take vegans to task, okay? So they're very focused on the notion that you can just buy vegan cocoa and it's okay. So they're a campaign that really looks at how can I be for social justice, for animal liberation, and for really important work that they do is how can I also build solidarity and support the anti-exploitation of human beings that bring commodities to America. So I've been looking at their work at cocoa, and they basically, what I find interesting about them is that what they want to do is they want to advocate a type of social justice and animal liberation that is not contingent upon consuming. So you don't necessarily need to eat chocolate. You don't necessarily need coffee. You don't necessarily need all of these things that have been linked to causing suffering of human beings. So what they propose is for vegans to take this concept of ahimsa in veganism, which is, a lot of vegans, we're vegan because we don't want to cause suffering to animals. But what the Food Empowerment Project says is really strange that I have met vegans who won't eat a cake because there's a little bit of eggs in it, right? Because you're eating the suffering of chickens. But the founder, Lauren Ornelas, said, I have met so many vegans basically who don't really care if their vegan chocolate cake has a little bit of human suffering in it from the cocoa that has been harvested. And her work, I think, is really profound because I have actually found similar observations where I've spoken to a lot of people who are very, very, very dedicated to animal liberation and relieving non-human animal suffering. And they will say that, I'm not going to touch that, there's a little bit of milk in it, I would never do that, there's a little bit of eggs in it. But at the same time, to have a conversation about, oh, that's interesting, that vegan candy bar you're eating it has cocoa in it that's actually made from enslaved children. Why does that not bother you? Or a lot of the sugar that's harvested, it's harvested from indentured cane workers who are Haitian and they're exploited in the Dominican Republic. Why is that okay? So to wrap it up, what I've been